for joining us for another episode of Men's Health Unscripted. Today, we have a very special guest. We are delighted to introduce the well-known cardiologist, author, and speaker. Please welcome America's Healthy Heart Doc, Dr. Joel Kahn. Dr. Kahn, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Well, thank you guys for being warriors for health, and particularly men's health, because we are the stupidest of the two genders. And honestly, I always like to speak to a men-oriented group because we die like flies, and we gotta, slap people into awareness.
Yeah, we can be stubborn at times.
Yeah, a little bit. No, we can't.
Well, being a well-known cardiologist, we have to jump right into heart disease and all things cardiovascular. So, as you know, it's no surprise, according to the CDC, heart disease has been the leading cause of death for the past 80 years or so. And so that deserves the attention that professionals like yourself advocate for. And so for our viewers that may not be familiar with you, your work, your mission, would you mind sharing with us how you were first drawn to cardiology as a career path?
Sure. Three things happened in my life that I didn't completely, plan, but worked out very well synergistically. I was born with a heart murmur 61 years ago, meaning somebody, nurse or doctor, put a stethoscope on an infant, heard a noise. My mother turned purple. It wasn't an emergency, but I started seeing a pediatric cardiologist, before I remember. But I do remember going when I was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I actually liked the guy. I liked the visits. I thought the whole technology, the lights, the noises, the smell of alcohol and cotton swabs, I can, stuff that you remember as a kid in old medical offices. And by age 10, you would ask me, what do you want to do? I would have said, I want to be a cardiologist when I grew up. Now, I didn't become a pediatric cardiologist. I became a grown-up adult cardiologist, which I'm glad I made that decision. They're both noble professions. But at any rate, that was very important. I grew up in a home where we kept kosher dietary rules, no pork, no meat and cheese. When I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan 43 years ago to the dorm, the first year of freshman, I was in a combined undergrad medical school advanced curriculum. There was nothing but a gigantic salad bar that really fit that description. And I started eating it and felt great. My girlfriend started doing the same, felt great. She was in nursing school and been my wife for more than 39 years. And we stopped eating animal products when Jimmy Carter was president and have not had any of any kind since. So got on that bandwagon early before there were really labels like whole food, plant-based, or vegan. I just ate salad bar. And then the kind of third thing, I started reading because I was now medical school fellowship training in cardiology. I was eating these plants. I was kind of curious. And there were people around me that were, biochemists and scientists that studied this. And I read a book in 1985 when I was trained to be a cardiologist. I was in Dallas, Texas. Every piece of meat, every piece of bacon, every piece of fried food. I actually ate okra for 3 years at the hospital. That was the only thing in the hospital I remember ever eating. I survived. But I read a book called A Diet for a New America by John Robbins. It actually laid out health, environment, animal rights. Didn't really know any of that stuff. Very powerful book. And I started cardiology practice in 1990. And 3 weeks later, Dean Ornish published his major scientific treatise called The Lifestyle Heart Trial that said you can reverse heart disease with whole food, plant-based diets, stress management, and fitness. So everything kind of fit together. I mean, it was here, I'm trained as a cardiologist. I eat only plants. I kind of get some of this health stuff. And now it's a tool. So really now for more than 30 years, if you need a prescription, if you need a procedure, but you're going to hear about sprouts and broccoli and salads and whole grains. And the science has so exploded to support, a plate that's either nearly, or in my case, and I would recommend completely, of whole food plants. It's not really a debate anymore. It's not an alternative diet. It is the most preventive diet on the planet.
Very primitive diet too. It's not very extreme. It's the plant-based diet. And the fact that you went 3 years in a hospital with okra, you don't see that these days. Especially when you
no, there's so many options. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not healthy plant options, but they take the stress off. I mean, in the day it was, you're driving to Burger King and get a baked potato with nothing on it, because that was a Wendy's. I'm sorry, give credit to Wendy's. There weren't options, and you're not going to find it as driving cross country. But now, you can walk into Taco Bell, and everybody knows other places. You've got to be careful about some of those choices, but you have options. And the data about food is medicine, which is a concept we credit going back over 2,000 years. But now the strong data with an explosion of obesity, COVID-19, diabetes, heart disease, as you said, it's actually 101 years in a row in the United States. More people have died of heart disease than any other cause of death since 1919. I mean, there's not an option anymore. What really is extreme, and what's funny about the human nature, hey guys, I'm going to take 500,000 chickens. I'm going to put them in this tiny little warehouse. They're never going to see sunshine. They're going to have no place to crap. They're going to eat each other's crap. We're going to feed them poor quality food full of arsenic and other pesticides, herbicides, and toxins. And I'm going to put that on your plate to eat instead of a sweet potato. What a great business plan. And we're going to, take over the world. I mean, if you really presented that, you'd say, oh my God, go away. I'll take my sweet potato and my salad. But it's that thing about, you put a frog in hot water, it'll jump out. You put it in warm water slowly, it keeps, it kind of gets dulled to the fact it's being boiled alive. We've been boiled alive for 50, 60 years by processed food, fast food, food industry that doesn't give a garbage in general about public health. And unfortunately, our government, let's lock down fast food restaurants, forget about schools and churches. Let's lock down. If we really want to stop COVID-19, we got to take all the hygienic measures, but let's start feeding people real food that boosts their immune system. So we've got some challenges, but at least we'll talk, a little while here and help some people make some quality decisions.
And I can definitely tell. Oh, sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
I was going to say before, they make that jump, we have to provide that education. So, Patrick and I are new to the movement, trying to educate people, but here we are. It's that first step, and we appreciate you. We know you have your patients through your longevity center, and it's not easy, but it's definitely the better way to go. So, yeah.
Yeah, again, human nature, some of the people listening right now are hearing this, you need to research. I tell my patients, I take a prescription pad. Watch Forks Over Knives. Right now it's available on Netflix. It may disappear for a little while. I read. Watch What the Health in 2017. Watch a Game Changers movie. You're going to know more than 90% of physicians, nurses, dentists, and dietitians about the scientific basis for a plate that's full of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, beans, peas, lentils. That's all you got to do. But even with that, so simple, maybe 3 hours of time invested. I spend time with patients, diabetes, erectile dysfunction. They've had their heart disease. They're aging at an incredibly rapid pace. Their life is literally disappearing in front of them. I can't give up burger. I can, oh, yes, you can. You just got to find the hot button. Maybe it's to not develop erectile dysfunction, guys. Maybe it's not to be on 4 medicines that give you erectile dysfunction, guys. Maybe it's to see, a daughter get married, be there for an elderly parent. You love your job and you like to do it, but, people die of this damn disease and they don't get a second chance. So don't wait and say, I'll do this down the road. I mean, start repairing the damage you've done with fast food, processed food, party food, hospital food, unfortunately. It's time. It's time. Right now is the day to start putting premium fuel in a premium body.
Yeah. So I'm really happy to hear that you pursue the patient care model. I mean, I think that's where a lot of medicine is transitioning. We're, as you know, in pharmacy school, and that's really kind of what they're teaching us. So I think that's really fantastic. And I know that in the time that I've made these dietary changes and lifestyle changes, I feel 100 times better. I used to play baseball. I had lingering injuries, and a lot of the inflammation and pain that I felt has really gone. I mean, it's been incredible. So just to kind of build a little bit more on the patient care model through the Kahn Center of Cardiac Longevity, what benefit does the patient care model have for you and your patients compared to maybe more traditional medical models?
Well, thank you, and wish you both well, because we can talk about pharmacists, but they do play a crucial role, and some of them have broken out as really experts on nutrition that have a web presence on Twitter and YouTube, and that's a great role example for you. And happy 1-year anniversary to you too on your plant-based journey. But so I am in a model some people call direct patient care. Used to be called concierge, but basically I want to spend more time. I did cardiology practice for about 25 years in a model. The more you can see in a day, the more you were macho, the more you were the hero of the group or the hospital, and you could make more money depending on the model you were in. If you were a salaried cardiologist, it wasn't going to happen. And I was one of the best, man. I could literally provide good quality care in 8 minutes, but you can't provide good quality preventive care in 8 minutes. You can get 30 seconds there. It might be literally just writing watch forks over knives on a pad of paper, and that's a step. So direct patient care, my patients pay cash. Sometimes they bring wine or high quality items of other kinds if they can't do it, and it's always negotiable, but it gives me the opportunity to spend time. I don't have an annual fee. In fact, if I'm seeing patients a lot, I have some patients with really bad high blood pressure and other cardiac conditions. We reduce a fee so that they can come more frequently, whether it's telehealth, whether it's live visits, to make it comfortable for them. But what they're getting is access 24/7. What they're getting is 30 minutes, 60 minutes if they need longer. They bring records this big from cardiac history, and and they get a very personalized report, very personalized follow-up. I don't charge for follow-up emails or phone calls that are just routine over questions that come up. So they get a lot of access. And, in my case, they get a lot of expertise of now more than 30 years of cardiology. I'm also board certified in what's called Integrative Cardiology. So, I don't reach for a prescription pad when I can reach for sleep therapy or food therapy or exercise therapy or stress management or nutraceutical vitamins, or everybody's got to have a home blood pressure cuff in my practice. You got to help me out here a little bit with a lot of people have either an Apple 5 watch or other EKG monitoring. So we use technology a lot. I mean, some cool stuff out there, genetic testing. But yeah, it's direct patient care. I don't let Medicare and Blue Cross tell me how to manage patients. And there is a lot of growing interest in that model, because honestly, most of my patients have such a high copay that if they were seeing a doctor, the office visit wouldn't be covered anyways.
That's great. Taking that leap from that traditional model more to more personal model with your patients. And if I'm not mistaken, you talk about preventative measures with your patient, you get about 30 seconds, but doctors aren't able to bill for nutrition consultations, if I'm not mistaken. Is that why something you found more beneficial, going the direct patient care model?
Yeah, if I had stayed in a traditional insurance-based model and wanted to spend 30 to 60 minutes a patient and see 8 patients a day or 10 patients a day, I mean, I would have been fired by a hospital system or a group practice as a low volume physician, and that's the reality. It's you are a number nowadays, and the only way to retain that old school you're in charge of your destiny is to break away from that model. Now, there are creative and innovative ways of providing preventive care in an insurance model. Some people are doing group sessions. It is billable to put 20 people. Now, we can't do it because of COVID, but 20 people in a lecture hall, teach them for an hour, one at a time. They break out to have their blood pressure and a few other consultations with a nurse, a doctor, a physician assistant, a dietitian. And you can actually bill for all of them. It's legal, it's encouraged, it's very effective. So there are, creative people with various organizations that are trying to do what I do and keep the cost approachable, but it's usually not cardiology. These are complex people and complex issues.
Right. Okay, and for our viewers, the direct patient care model that he is speaking of is through the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity, and we're going to have the link to his website, www.drjoelkahn.com, where it's all things Dr. Kahn. Just go down the rabbit hole of links, and it's all great content. And so we know you're well known for being America's heart doctor, but what really grabbed our attention, being we're Men's Health page, we want to break stigmas. We heard you say that treating erectile dysfunction is truly a passion of yours. And as a Men's Health channel dedicated to that, we have to know, what is your professional opinion on erectile dysfunction in terms of signs, symptoms, management, prognosis, and we know you offer the Gaines wave therapy.
Right.
So feel free to speak on that as well.
Sure. And I thank you for that kind introduction. My first book of 6 was published by Reader's Digest, and I wrote for the magazine, which is still in existence, everybody. I can remember as a kid reading it in the doctor or dentist's office. But they gave me that title, America's Healthy Heart Doc, for the column that I wrote for them. So kept it. It was nice of them. Erectile dysfunction, I did not learn about erectile dysfunction in cardiology training in the late 1980s, and probably didn't ask too many men about it in the early 1990s. But about 20 years ago, solid research data, this is just absolutely as solid as knowing blood pressure is not good for your heart arteries, indicated that a clue to the slow, I'm just going to use a little model here, we are born with clean arteries, and just assume this is a heart artery, even though a heart artery is never as big as the model. It's bigger than my finger. But, by the time you're 25 or 30, your arteries are starting to develop this yellow, waxy substance. And by the time, you can be 35, 40, 55, 60, your arteries are really clogged up. That's called hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, heart disease. It's not a natural process. Genetics play a role in about 20% of it, but the choice of smoking, not smoking, do you go to the gym and work out or not, and do you eat quality plant-based diets like a Mediterranean-style diet, or do you eat fast food, fried food, processed food, heavy meat, heavy cheese, heavy dairy, egg diets, are the major determinants of that, with adding in one genetic factor I think we'll talk about called lipoprotein little a. With all that said and done, this process is silent. It goes on. You have no clue. And one day you have a heart attack. You're 49 or you're 54 and you have bypass or you drop dead. The literature 15 years ago started saying, we've got a group of guys that had a heart attack. And we asked them, did you notice anything in the 5 years before your heart attack? Or a group of guys that had bypass surgery, or a group of guys that had to get rushed to the emergency room to get a stent. Consistently, the comment was, about 3-4 years ago, I started noticing erectile dysfunction. It was a problem I hadn't had before. The statistics overall are pretty simple and scary. By age 40, 40% of men answer a survey saying, I have erectile dysfunction of some degree, some difficulty initiating and completing the sex act of intercourse. 50% of age 50, 60% of guys age 60, 70% of guys at age 70. So it's a phenomenally common problem, and a lot of people just give up on that part of life and find other joy, and that's always a personal decision. But a lot of guys are just decimated. And when I started asking these questions routinely over a decade ago, quietly, comfortably, without threat, I found guys wanted to talk about it. They were hoping somebody would ask about it. They were almost grabbing my arm as I was walking out of the room. Wait, let me tell you about one more thing going on. And it became absolutely routine for me to ask and inquire and make it comfortable. And, it's a big problem. And the connection is that a large portion of erectile dysfunction is poor blood supply in the groin, arteries damaged in the groin, and they are smaller than heart arteries, and they may respond with that health problem before there's chest discomfort or an emergency room call 911. So the urology medical literature, the cardiology medical literature 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago says, if you've got the problem, don't ignore it. Go see your primary care doc. Ask for your blood pressure, ask for your cholesterol, ask for your blood sugar, ask for maybe a few more exotic labs. Think about getting your heart checked, and think about learning how to protect your heart through diets like a whole food plant diet, like fitness, like not smoking. Don't wait till you're having a heart attack to tell a medical professional you have erectile dysfunction. What's more common is 4 years before a heart attack, they're going to see a urologist, a primary care doc, and they're getting a prescription for Viagra or Cialis, which consistently work, and they're usually pretty safe. But we've ignored the opportunity to go the next step and say, you know, maybe you are a candidate for generic Viagra, but we've got to dig deep to make sure you're not, you know, on your path to that #1 cause of death in America. You know, you don't want Viagra and die. So get your heart checked. It's a big issue. And, you know, lifestyle is an issue. Smokers have more erectile dysfunction, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, blood sugar. Diabetics are really having a problem with it. And also you want to address that. Good fitness, good weight. Extra fat around the belly can raise your estrogen level in a man and lower your testosterone level. And it's hard to maintain a thin weight in the United States, but the gym and a plant-based diet are two of the better ways to do it. Excessive alcohol is not going to, you know, improve your sexual performance at all. But there are some, and once you've had your heart evaluated and you make the lifestyle changes, some guys are still having trouble. So you can use food again. We've learned a lot about a magic chemical in the body called nitric oxide. If you eat watermelon, you make more of this gassy chemical in your blood vessels, you may have better sexual function. And leafy greens like arugula, spinach, and kale. And beets for all, God knows why. And some nuts like pine nuts and walnuts. So it's not going to be a bacon or a beef jerky or a cheeseburger or you know, a malt and fries. That's going to have the very opposite effect and make you increasingly unable to respond at all. And you want to use that, but you even go beyond that. There are some additional treatments urologist or a male health sexual expert might use. Some guys don't respond to Viagra and Cialis even after the whole heart check. There are injections that certain guys will give right into the penis that cause a response. A pretty big job to do that, but guys are so you know, cornered in a hole and want to have a response that they will do that. It's called bi-mix and tri-mix and quad mix. That's usually prescribed by a urologist. Gainswave, just in a 90-second amazing story, is I started hearing about a procedure called Gainswave about 2.5 years ago. A guy named Ben Greenfield, a health and fitness guru podcaster, but I'm friends with him, and another guy named Dave Asprey, another health and fitness guru with a gigantic business telling people to put butter in their coffee, the bulletproof coffee. They started talking about, hey, we went to Miami and we had this thing treating our male organ, and even though we're healthy 35, 40-year-olds, it was even better than it was before. And they did it for publicity. They did it for sensationalism. They did it because they are kind of biohackers trying new things. And I ignored the whole topic. I know the guys, you know, they're bright, but it had no relevance to me. About a year ago, maybe a little bit more, at a medical meeting, there was the Gainswave table. There was a packet of literature, science. I grabbed it because I was on my way to the airport and needed something to read on a plane. And I was, oh my God, I'm stuck. There's science there. So what is it? You've got a giant kidney stone. For about 45 years, they put you in a water tank. They put you to sleep and they go boom, boom, boom with shock waves. It's called shock wave lithotripsy. You have to be put under because it's powerful, breaks your kidney stone up. Well, for reasons I don't know, some cardiologists in Europe 20 years ago said, if we turn the energy down and use low energy shock waves, we think we can grow stronger hearts, more blood vessels, more nerves, stem cells. And going through 10 years of history, it works. If you've had a heart attack in Europe, they're going to go and give you a procedure. And then an absolutely crazy Israeli urologist named Dr. Vardy 10 years ago said, you can actually make new blood vessels, new nerves, stem cells in the heart. I'm going to take that machine, turn it down even lower energy, put it on patients with erectile dysfunction, put it right on their penis and in the area. And it works. Randomized studies show about a 12-minute, not terribly uncomfortable procedure. I actually have the machine sitting about 5 feet away, applied throughout the groin 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. 80% of guys get an improved sexual response. And it's actually the root cause. It's better blood flow. It's better nerve supply. It's stem cells. Nothing's injected. There's no risk. It's not covered by insurance at this point, but there's about 60 research studies around the world that suggest this is a real treatment. And a lot of urologists who scoffed it in the beginning are now, also embracing it. So look at it. It's quality of life. That's not quantity of life. Quantity of life, you need to exercise, quit smoking, eat well, know your numbers like your blood pressure. But quality of life matters. And I feel badly for guys that are really, really stuck in terms of ED. So we try and offer any help we can.
That's really cool. Very interesting stuff. And
Yeah.
so a few minutes ago, you mentioned lipoprotein A, and doing my research on you, I heard you talk about it, and there's possibility of genetic predisposition. So my father passed away of a heart attack, his dad of a heart attack. So I know that I have that in my system. And a lot of people maybe have heard of HDL or LDL, but could you explain a little bit more about lipoprotein A, and do standard cholesterol checks, are those sufficient enough to monitoring those levels? What does it do? A little bit about.
Yeah, it's great questions. You know, I would certainly encourage everybody listening, you know, at any point, but you want once at least, even in your 20s, even maybe when you're 18, 25, 32, you want to get to a doctor. You want your cholesterol drawn once. 1 in every 250 people have a genetically high cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. It could be 350, 400. You're not going to know that at age 25, but it's doing damage. You want to make sure your blood pressure is okay, your blood sugar, you know, maybe they look in your eyes, the standard physical. However, that approach, which is what they do at 30, 40, 50, 60, a physical exam, may help identify people at risk for dropping dead, having a heart attack, getting erectile dysfunction. But we miss a pretty big piece of the pie. The data is that, you know, and most people probably can hear a story about somebody who was in great shape and still had a heart attack. The most well-known story in the last couple of years I'm familiar with, the show The Biggest Loser, weight loss show with Bob Harper and Jillian Michaels as the trainers. Bob Harper, ripped, you know, athletic guy, 51 years old, March 2017, maybe it was February 2017. He's on a treadmill at a health club in New York City, and he has a cardiac arrest. He's out, he's dead. But a cardiologist was working out next to him, and a defibrillator machine was on the wall of the gym. They brought him back and rushed him to a New York hospital, and he was on a ventilator, and he was near death. He had an emergency catheterization, emergency stent, and he made a recovery, thank goodness, and he's been on the Dr. Oz show and other talk shows. I learned I had a genetic cholesterol disorder, never showed up on my blood work over the years, and I had my blood work. And that's what lipoprotein A is. There is one form of genetic cholesterol, why you want your routine blood work, where your cholesterol could be 400. That's 1 in 250 people. This lipoprotein A, it's a cholesterol particle, is present in 1 in 4 people. It's the most common genetic risk of dropping dead, having a heart attack, having a stroke, even messing up one of your heart valves. But it's not in that routine lab. Maybe your work is at a wellness fair. You had your cholesterol checked on a finger poke. It's not lipoprotein A. Maybe you've actually been to a doctor and had a physical. It's not lipoprotein A. It's one more check of the box. In Europe, recently, they've now added it as a routine blood test. It's available everywhere, Quest, LabCorp, hospitals, anywhere. Anybody can get it done. But you have to get a doctor or a nurse or a physician assistant to check a box to order it. Or a guy like you with the family history. There's places you can send blood off to. There's one called lifeextension.com, WellnessFX. You don't need a doctor. You buy a blood test. You just got to get somebody to draw your blood. So it's about to become a big deal in this country. Why is it about to become a big deal? Because it does actually cause death, heart attack, stroke, the requirement for a heart valve surgery. There hasn't been a clear-cut therapy. I have a practice full of patients here in suburban Detroit with sky-high blood levels of lipoprotein little a. They had it drawn, or I recommend it be drawn. I've had it drawn on thousands and thousands of people. It's about 25 to 30% of the people come back positive. And for many of them, it's the missing link. I don't get why I had a stroke. I don't get why my grandfather had a bypass and all those questions. Oh, you're a family with sky-high genetic cholesterol called lipoprotein A. There is a drug that's been developed that's in trials right now. One of the drug companies bought a small company. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of education to primary care docs and gynecologists and internists. And they're going to start adding it to the lab panel more routinely. But that's still a little bit away. In fact, I'm helping them with that. So you have to fight a little bit to get the lab test, even though it's very inexpensive, you know, $30, $35. But you should know, and you should know your risk. And if it's sky high, you know, it's even more important. Hit the gym, don't smoke, eat this incredibly healthy diet. Try and make sure your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your regular LDL cholesterol are in shape. But we can do a lot of good for a lot of people if we check and identify it's elevated, and then certainly if we get a drug therapy. But in the meantime, use lifestyle therapy. You can also use niacin, which is extremely inexpensive over-the-counter vitamin to lower it. So I keep myself very busy with patients all over that asked and got the test, and now it's high and they're concerned. So drug therapy would be good. Soon, in under a decade, you'll be able to go and get genetic therapy and probably take the gene out that causes lipoprotein A. So, it isn't necessarily lifelong drug therapy. I mean, it's an amazing time in medicine.
Yeah. The drug you're speaking of, is that, I know in your podcast you mentioned Novartis coming out with an antibody for it, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, actually, I spoke and misspoke. It is Novartis. I actually had a phone call with them today. It's actually technically not an antibody. We have another cholesterol medicine you inject that's an antibody. It's called an ASO, an antisense oligonucleotide, but it actually prevents the gene from copying and creating the protein that becomes lipoprotein little a. It's genius. Yeah. So far looks very safe. It's just going to be very expensive. Sure. It's amazing technology.
We know that you love talking your biochemistry, so we don't want to dampen that at all. If you want to go down that route, we love hearing about it. But we know that you have your book on lipoprotein A, great selling on Amazon, from what I can tell. How did you get into it? Was it something that you discovered with your patients, or the research you discovered?
I've been drawing them for a decade, blood levels of lipoprotein little a, which when they come back high, it forces you to read. Then with Bob Harper, I started writing some blogs, doing some YouTubes, podcasts on the topic. And I realized there's actually a lot of science, and there's some really, really esteemed academic physicians, scientists, biochemists that talk about it. But nobody was really speaking to the public, which is where you want to go. So the idea that there is no book written on this topic and there are people hungry for information, presented itself, and I've published other books. So, starting last fall, I started gathering all the research, all the data, but I also didn't want to write a book that only a medical doctor could read. I write books for the public. I just enjoy that more. So it's out. I will be commercial and show the beautiful cover. If nobody knows that word, it's lipoprotein A, the heart's quiet killer. But, it's half science book. It's actually half a nutrition book with some recipes. It's very inexpensive on all the sellers. And it's a gift for somebody, particularly that family history with a lot of problems. If anybody listening has a father, a mother with early stroke, heart attack, bypass, or died early, get your blood level checked. Find the curious connection that might be there in your family.
That's valuable information. And everyone, to all our viewers, that's going to be down in the description, down below. Check it out. So we're talking lipoprotein A, EKGs, erectile dysfunction, all these almost daunting things that go on because the cardiac system is so sophisticated. And we mentioned all these tests, the Gaines wave therapy, things that may just sound, as I said, daunting to people. You discuss the importance of what is known as a calcium scan for the heart. So what exactly is this procedure, and how can patients interpret those results? Yeah,
it's an excellent question. And, if you pause for a minute and wonder about the fact that we've talked about heart disease as the #1 killer of men and women in the United States for 101 years, or 80 years, but a lot of years. Yet, think about, you guys are young, but you go to a doctor, you might get blood work and a blood pressure. But, a woman starts getting a mammogram screening for breast cancer in her mid-40s, perhaps. A man and a woman, usually by mid-40s to 50, will at least hear the words, you really ought to have a colonoscopy and look for a silent polyp, or maybe actually colorectal cancer. But where is the sentence? And we're going to order to make sure you're not walking around with some heart disease so you're not at risk of dropping dead. And the answer is it's not part of the current medical system that happens, 99.9% of the time. In reality, about 25 years or more ago, it was recognized that CT scans, CAT scans, which at the time were being used mainly for brain disease and lung disease, could now actually, the technology advanced, image the heart without a blur. The brain doesn't beat 70 times a minute. The heart moves consistently. and it was nothing but a blur in the early days of CT scanning. But with improved speed and technology, radiologists could say, wow, we can see that network of arteries around the heart. There's an amazing documentary also on the internet called The Widowmaker Movie. The Widowmaker Movie. It's a fascinating, hour and a half documentary how this test was developed, what it shows, and why it isn't yet routine. Specifically, just to juice it up a little, a legislator in Texas 7-8 years ago had a big heart attack in his early 50s, started researching, why did my doctor not order anything so I would have known I was walking around with this problem? Because the problem's there for years and years before you have a heart attack. He came across the calcium score CT scan. Hey, why didn't my doctor order this? This test costs $100 and takes 10 seconds. And he got so ticked off, he actually got a bill in the legislation in the state of Texas, and it was passed. So everybody in Texas can get a free one of these at age 50, even without, a diagnosis of smoking or diabetes. Most other states, you need your doctor to write a prescription, heart, calcium, CT scan. And in my state, you're going to pay $75 or $100 out of pocket. You literally lie down, hold your breath, and you go home. There's no needle, there's no injection, there's no iodine. It's a small amount of radiation equivalent to what a woman gets with a mammogram. It's something, so I don't order these on 18-year-olds, but if your family history is very strong, I might order it on you when you're 38. I don't own the CAT scanner, the hospital has it. If you're 45, I'm almost certainly going to tell you to do it. It's amazing how much silent heart disease is out there. And on the flip side, you come back with a score or a number of 0, your arteries look good. You can be reassured and you can work on your lifestyle and work on your diet and all these factors, but you probably don't need prescription drugs for most of the conditions. That's what the American Heart Association says now. If your doctor gave you Lipitor or the other drugs, you might want to go get a heart CT scan. And if you're a 0, you might not need that prescription. You might just try diet and exercise. So it is the heart's mammogram. It should be routine. It's another one you can pull your hair out about why it's not yet out there. It's amazing how patients have to fight with their medical team to get a prescription to go get it done. But it's well worth fighting for. It's simple. It almost never leads to bypass or stents. There are some people that are so advanced heart disease that we identify that they actually may need therapy like that. But it's a real wake-up call. You need the best blood pressure. You need the best blood sugar. You need the best diet. You need the best cholesterol. You need lipoprotein A checked and work on it if it's elevated. Now you need a good fitness plan. You got to really pay attention. You got the disease. Let's not ignore it. So it's a perfect screening tool.
Very cool. So speaking of pulling your hair out, I've heard you talk about hospital food before. I recently had a family member who suffered a stroke, and I'm very close to them. And from the moment that they were able to chew solid food, and Steven's heard me complain and probably pull my hair out about this, the first meal was a cheeseburger, and then the subsequent meals were like fried chicken, gravy. I mean, you've I'm sure seen it. And
it's sort of like homicide, isn't it?
Yeah. Or they just.
Or hamicide. It's sort of hamicide.
Maybe they just want her back in there. I don't know. But I was just really appalled at that. And I just kind of wanted to see like what your thoughts were.
Yeah.
Maybe that this isn't really an effective treatment for stroke.
Well, by the time they've been admitted, diet is probably not going to reverse that episode, but you've got future risk of stroke, and many stroke patients are at risk of heart attack and loss of leg and erectile dysfunction. So, the idea that nutrition plays a role in stroke health and heart health, should come up without a question. Some of your audience might know a well-known health expert named Chris Wark, W-A-R-K, who actually was diagnosed with colorectal cancer at age 26. And he had the surgery, amazingly, and the first meal was a big sloppy Joe full of beef, and oil and fats. And he talked about how that just struck him at that age. I thought meat was one of the factors in colorectal cancer, and it is. Why are you feeding me, the cause after I've had, hopefully the cure? And he's a very good person to learn about, preventive cancer strategies. Chris beat cancer. Be a great guest, actually, for your show. I'd be happy to introduce you. But it is outrageous, and it you can't give them any leeway, I mean, for just ignorance. Now, there are cost pressures. You have to feed hospital patients with, you know, a limited budget per day. But the companies that provide most of this food, there's one called Sodexo, one called Compass. I've seen their choices. They have healthy choices, but usually hospitals are just, they don't want pushback. You know, it's all about, you're in a hospital, you give a review of your visit, press gains score, I think it's called, and like JD Power scores. That's what it's all about. I mean, if you feed your patient, you know, chickpeas and carrots and hummus and brown rice, and they say the food was so primitive, where was my prime rib and my, you know, sloppy Joe? You know, it actually detracts from your ability to attract patients in the future. I think that's part of it. It's purposeful marketing of same thing McDonald's, Arby's, and Wendy's do, but the mission of a hospital is not the mission of Arby's, Wendy's, Burger King, and McDonald's. It should be a very different and much more educated and science-based mission. So part of it is that. Part of it is when they change the food choices in the doctor's dining room and the general cafeteria. I'm telling you, the employees revolt. I've seen it firsthand. Why is it not Fried Chicken Wednesday anymore? Why don't we have, you know, a hamburger or sausage egg McMuffin, you know, breakfast? And, you know, sometimes the medical staff is the loudest objection. It's horrible, but it reflects the level of nutrition information and food addiction and just ignorance. You know, nutrition is not taught. Prevention is not taught with any regularity at any stage of medical training. So it's an awful problem, and people need to complain. People need to bring their relatives, you know, healthy food. Does it really matter? It does matter. I won't go through them all. There's 10, 20 studies of high quality. We got healthy volunteers, and we fed them 2 meals, and we measured something. We measured gut health. We measured brain health, their clarity of thinking. We measured heart artery health. We measured arm artery health. Study after study after study shows just one meal that's like what you saw your relative brought. One cheeseburger, fry, you know, piece of cake meal to a hospital patient. It, within an hour, has a major impact on their cardiovascular, gastrointestinal, and inflammatory status. So I'm not sure we can ever prove because they fed that patient that food for 2-3 days, they had a complication or wound healing or a recurrent stroke or heart attack. I suspect it's real. Blood pressure goes up, blood thickens, inflammation rises, you know, cholesterol, triglycerides respond. But, you know, I think they are actually probably hospital food is killing people. It's very hard to document it. It's delaying wound healing. And it, you know, you're missing that golden opportunity to say, you know, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith, you know, food is some of the reason you're in the hospital. If you want to stay healthy and get maximal, you know, progress out of this hospitalization, here's a information packet that we're giving you, or a video to watch, or great food to eat. And it should extend to the hospital cafeteria and vending machines. You know, the employees are just as valuable as the patients. The guests of the patients are just as valuable. And every day they can get bacon for lunch, dinner, and breakfast. They can get cheese McMuffins, all 3 meals, cheese, pepperoni pizza, foods that have been studied and shown to have amazing detriment. So my hospital is no better. I walk in one of my hospitals, boom, before you see registration, you see the Wendy's sign. I mean, it's the first sign you see. This is a university hospital in Detroit, Michigan. And my other hospital had to compete, so they put in another burger joint just to make sure their review scores didn't drop. You know, we can't get Wendy's, but we can at least get a greasy burger.
Yeah, I saw that on your Instagram with the vending machine right when you walk through the door.
Pepsi, Coke, Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, anything you want. Yeah, here's your crystal meth too.
While we're at it, before getting into you know, the more nitty gritty of cardiovascular, to a lesser degree, Patrick and I, as we mentioned, we're pharmacy students, and a lot of these organizations, when they host their events, if it's, you know, Diabetes Awareness Day, right, and you walk in and it's donuts piled on cookies, piled on pizza, and we and a couple buddies in the back who really adopted a more plant-based role, like, this is why we're not joining the organization. Like, if we don't stand for what they're you know, what they're talking, if they're not walking the walk and talking the talk, it's not something we want to be a part of. So that was a big factor in us starting this and really just trying to kind of uncover the education gap that's there. Again, not to the degree of a hospital, but if you're talking education and you're talking healthcare to people, there's a certain level that you yourself have to live. So that's what we're here trying to do. Yeah.
I agree. And it is really, really distressing. And, you know, all meetings right now are virtual medical meetings. So there's actually probably better health because there isn't, you know, the consistently disappointing food choices and, you know, muffins full of refined flour, sugar, and eggs. And, you know, it's amazing to go to American Heart Association meeting like I just was, and it is Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Mountain Dew choices. I mean, some of this is the big money that big food throws around. You know, McDonald's was a sponsor of the American Heart Association for years and years. I think it's the movie What the Health, 2017, that goes through all the conflicts that the American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, and some of the other organizations have in terms of huge donations. And they're not random donations. Coca-Cola knows you donate to a medical society, you know, it buys you a little bit of credibility, a picture on Instagram, like you said, or whatever it is. It's evil. It's evil. I mean, money is needed, but sometimes you have to say that's dirty money and we're not taking it at the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society. I mean, the pink, you know, Minute Maid lemonade every October, which has more sugar than any drink on the market about. It's like 6 or 7 teaspoons of sugar per just little can. I mean, the message is so distorted. That's not breast cancer prevention or awareness. That's, you know, causing a variety of diseases if consistently, you know, ingested.
And it's painful to laugh and smile at, but it's out of pain. But we couldn't have said it better ourselves. And so being a cardiologist, we hear all about heart disease, and that's what patients hear, heart disease, cardiovascular, they think only their heart. But can you explain the role of blood vessels and the role they play in all this and educate our viewers as to why these are equally as important when discussing cardiovascular health and disease?
Sure. You know, there's just some fun statistics, but there are actually in every human estimated 50,000 miles of arteries in your body. That's, if you just say that's 2 times around the planet Earth, and that's just one human. That's how many highways and branches and sub-branches that you have. Some of them going and breaking up into little vessels all through your brain, all through your chest, your heart, of course, blood vessels that branch like a tree trunk down to the finest little ones we call capillaries. But men, those are the same blood vessels that supply your sex organs and your ability to enjoy sex. So they provide all of that too. Lining the arteries, 50,000 miles of arteries, some as big as this model, some of the big arteries. There's a single layer called the endothelium. You don't have to absolutely remember that. It's the arteries wallpaper. The blood's on the inside. The arteries are made of some tissue like collagen and muscle, but there's a layer that separates the blood from the rest of the artery. Endothelium, and there was so much science about the endothelium. The Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1998 was awarded to 3 researchers. If you eat well, if you exercise and don't smoke, that lining, which is alive, it's cells, it's tissue, is very healthy. It makes a lot of nitric oxide, which is this little gas the body likes to make. It's not the one the dentist uses to make you laugh. Nitrous oxide. Nitric oxide. Nitrous is the one the dentist uses, NO. And if you make a lot of NO because you like a big salad and you like beets and you like watermelon and you like going to the gym and you like not smoking, you'll have good blood pressure. You'll have arteries that fight and resist blockage anywhere in the body, from the brain to the toes and below the belly button as we talk. And, you know, you will have better sexual function. The pathway by which Viagra and Cialis work involves maximizing the response to nitric oxide. So if you make a lot, you're not going to need those drugs. It's just going to all happen naturally by eating healthy, exercise and all. But, you know, we can mess up arteries to our kidneys and develop high blood pressure. We can mess up arteries to our brain and be at risk of mini stroke and stroke, in our eyes and risk our vision, certainly in our heart, and have heart attacks and death. Occasionally, you know, the intestinal organs get clogged. They're bigger arteries, so there's a little more leeway. And certainly the arteries that supply the groin, the sex organs of penis, are very prone to blockage, and legs too. So, there's a statement 400 years ago by an English physician who was very famous: "You are as old as your arteries," Dr. Sydenham. And the issue is, nobody really knows how old their arteries are until they get that heart calcium CT scan and you get a little reality check, which is why I recommend that so often, because that really tells you the status of, arguably the most important organ in your life. Just a little statistic, that endothelium lining in the 50,000 miles of your arteries, somebody had the mathematical power. If you took that all out, this layer of tissue, it would fill 7 or 8 tennis courts. So that's how big an organ it is, vital organ. You'd like to treat that well so you maintain your health, your libido, your sexual function, your brain power, your heart health.
That's incredible. Now that we're on the topic of arteries and vessels, I have to mention your latest podcast I heard about yoga, and we've done several interviews on yoga now, yoga and the benefit onto arteries and blood vessels. We don't spoil the whole podcast you had there, but if you just want to talk about that a little bit.
I have a short podcast every week. Thank you for listening, called Heart Doc VIP. Invite anybody to follow it. But I was aware of some science because I've been a yoga guy for a long time, pretty consistently. But some data that your ability to touch your toes. How many guys say, I'm tight as can be, I'm as inflexible as can be? Maybe they're gym rats, lifting weights, but they're just never doing a flexibility exercise like stretching or yoga or Pilates. And there was some data that said your ability to touch your toes, your ability to demonstrate flexibility in ways that a physical therapist or exercise physiologist could measure, actually seemed to relate to healthier, younger arteries. The very flexibility of your spine seemed to relate to the flexibilities of the arteries that are tracking along your spine. Very interesting. Then there was some, what we call like randomized and intervention trials. Take 2 groups of people that are pretty sedentary. Tell one group, just keep being sedentary for 12 weeks. Tell the other group, here's some stretches we want you to do for 12 weeks. Measure their artery function before and after. And lo and behold, you can actually make your arteries more flexible, act younger, have less, probability of creating disease and distress. And then there was just, the reason I did the podcast, a brand new article. You can even stretch just one side of your body and you get a benefit in all the arteries, because the mechanism is actually partly mechanical, but it's through the brain and the brain's nervous system that arteries relax and act healthier. So, before or after a run, do runner's stretch, bend over, touch your toes, look up a couple simple yoga flows that you can do at home, online. There's so many examples. I do a sequence anybody can read about on the web called the 5 Tibetan Rites, R-I-T-E-S. It's a 10-minute yoga flow. It's all about stretching and flexibility. And it just feels good to do it every day. And you can do it, kitchen. You can do it in a workout room. You can do it in a living room. There's no equipment needed.
Very good. I'm a big yoga guy myself, so it's
good.
It's good. So I've heard you talk a lot about fasting. I've also, that's something I've subscribed to over the past couple of years as part of my health journey. And could you tell our viewers a little bit about fasting, maybe some of the benefits that they could get that you've uncovered?
Yeah. And personally, during my medical training and most of my life, the only time the word fasting came up was an occasional religious holiday, whether it was Ramadan for Muslims, whether it was Yom Kippur for Jews, whether it was Lent, Mormons fast, and Latter-day Saints and the rest, Adventist Church. There's frequent fasting activities. But starting maybe 25 years ago, the science of what happens when you don't eat for a few days started becoming a focus of just a few scientists. And lo and behold, it was pretty consistent. You take an animal model, could be an earthworm, could be a yeast, could be a mouse, feed it less or don't feed it for a few days a month, and they actually were healthier. They looked better. They stayed younger because there was a control group. They actually lived longer. And there's actually no animal model like that you lower their calorie intake or some days a month don't feed them, and they don't actually show a benefit. When that was examined, it turns out Those animals have systems, have biochemical systems. We're under stress, we're underfed. Of course, you provide water, so they're not dehydrated at risk. And certain mechanisms turn off that are involved in causing damage to the body. Certain mechanisms turn on to cause repair. And you can actually shift the balance in these animals, repair some damage that came about from sunlight, from poor quality food, from blood pressure issues, whatever. And the animals were actually in better health. That concept of self-healing, self-repair, won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2016. It's called autophagy. There's a lot known about it. Well, it turns out fasting is how you activate. You have these pathways, everybody listening has them. But when we eat 3 times a day or even 2 times a day, day after day after day, we don't use these pathways. They're there. They're there when we're under stress. So it's become popular to create some stress in your life. I use a program created by the world's leading scientist on fasting. His name is Walter Longo. He's a professor in University of Southern California, Los Angeles. And it's a box of gluten-free, non-GMO, plant-based food. They're actually pre-made meals. You just add some hot water or you eat some olives and some nuts. It's only 800 calories a day, but it was designed by the leading scientist. It gives you the same response as if you didn't eat at all for 5 days, but I'd prefer to have 800 calories of 3 small, high-quality, food sources. And what it's shown in scientific studies, lowering inflammation, lowering fat around the belly, lowering blood pressure, raising your stem cells. And the skeptics say I could eat 3 Snickers a day and get 800 calories a day. Well, it's scientifically not a Snicker. There is no sugar. There is no refined carbohydrates. It's actually a bit of a ketogenic diet play using plants. And there is now, human data, including cancer, that's just unbelievable. So Prolon, Prolon, is the 5-day fasting program I use. Some people just do a water juice fast 1 day a week. Go for it. Although some scientists say it takes about 30 hours to see real physiologic change. So, 18 or 12 or 14 hours may be a benefit, but it's really not fasting. This 5-day program is kind of like the sweet spot. Get the most advantage with the least amount of pain, because some people do water fast for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, and so that's a lot of pain. When I do this fasting mimicking diet, I'm working, I'm active all day long. I just don't do a really hard workout because calories are down, and it's more about repairing the body than beating yourself up in the gym for those 5 days.
Do you ever recommend this to any of your patients?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. There's a few I don't. Very brittle, frail, ultra elderly, type 1 diabetics, people on insulin. I got to be careful because this might be 1/3 of the calories they would normally be eating. Most type 2 diabetics, this is a good program that may help them improve their status. Some are doing it just to manage weight around the belly. Some are doing it to manage inflammation. Some are doing it because it's sort of like a spa food program for 5 days. Like you might get it and spending thousands of dollars, but it's much less than thousands of dollars. So yeah, the feedback, unless somebody hates olives or is nut allergic, because there are some of both most days, has been resoundingly very, very positive. And it's all been thought out by the world's leading scientists. So, you don't really need to think about it. It's already credible. It's patented and everything else.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of data on that. Intermittent fasting, the 5-day fasting, the 72-hour fasting. It's right. Data is just coming out for plant-based.
Well, we need a solution. We got food available everywhere. 24 hours a day you can eat. We don't have great mechanisms to say I'm full and I'll stop eating. We eat so fast. We don't chew. We don't give our body any time. And, a mindful approach. If you're really good and you can eat slow and chew and maybe eat within a 10-hour window and don't eat 14 hours a day, a lot of health benefit. A lot of us need a more, specific plan. And this is just, you don't need a dietitian. It's already been researched and studied and published.
Yeah, we had a dietitian on last week, 2 weeks ago, that talked about how eating meals should not be something you're just inhaling food. It should be a thoughtful, mindful process. So that's wonderful.
As a group, chew 20, 30 times every mouthful. I mean, that's a pretty high level goal to have, but there are some benefits to doing that. You eat less. 24 hours a day to get through one meal. So
Well, we're talking cardiologist, dietitian. We have to show our profession some love. I know we touched on it for a brief moment earlier in the interview. And we definitely have some classmates that watch these videos. So obviously, aside from starting a podcast, how can pharmacists play a role in patient care and men's health outside of what we're typically known for in healthcare?
Well, and I agree completely. I was drinking some spicy tea and I got to the bottom of the cup. I got the spice. One, you have access to patients all the time. Two, you often have access to a blood pressure cuff that might be in the pharmacy, which many people just don't ever check their blood pressure. Number three, you have a lot of, pharmacology, biochemistry, and clinical information. And it's just a great opportunity to bring up, lifestyle brochures. Maybe the pharmaceutical industry provides some lifestyle brochures. Maybe there's some others. People never hear the word diabetes type 2 might be reversible. Blood pressure might be reversible. Cholesterol might be reversible. We're talking through lifestyle. And anybody that says it is doing somebody a favor. So yeah, it's just another touch point. There's even been a research project in LA. It was super cool. What happens if you put a blood pressure cuff in black barbershops in LA? There was so much benefit, one more touch point of somebody who only did one thing. Here's a cuff, put your arm in, here's the number, take it to your doctor. They could document the health benefit. You guys have obviously sophisticated knowledge, and you have an opportunity through mechanisms like this to really educate. So it's powerful. I mean, we can't miss an opportunity. I mean, it should happen in the produce department. I mean, again, certain people have different levels of medical knowledge. You guys have a lot, but the dentist, some dental practices check blood pressure and teach heart healthy lifestyle. Another great touch point. Chiropractors do it. A lot of them do it. Unfortunately, hospitals, MDs, DO offices might be the least, involved in teaching prevention and lifestyle. And that's why we're talking, so we can see that change.
So thank you. That's like pretty interesting stuff. So just to kind of build on that a little bit, in your experience, why do you think there's been so much emphasis placed on treatment of a disease that's already happened or is starting to manifest itself rather than the prevention side? So maybe explain your phrase, sprouts over stents. Yeah. And again, why is this so important to disease prevention?
Yeah, I use another hashtag, prevent, not stent, and I'm a trained cardiologist that places stents and treats heart attacks. But prevention is much better. Prevention is much more effective. You just have to start earlier. You have to, encourage people with education. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it's still not the case. The doctors, nurses, dentists have to take a board examination. Pharmacologists, the pharmacists have to take a board examination. The questions on the board are about drug therapy, surgical therapy, radiation therapy, chemotherapy. The questions are rarely ever about nutrition, sleep, lifestyle. There could be an exercise or smoking question, but the curriculum in medical training is geared to have you pass the board certification. And if it isn't a big section, it's not going to be a big portion of the curriculum. So there is some focus trying to get more of a lifestyle orientation, nutrition orientation questions, but then they got to provide the curriculum so that students are ready. Number two, there's huge confusion because most physicians, surgeons, and all the other health professionals get very little nutrition training. A few like me stumble into nutrition or purposely are interested in it, maybe because of a health challenge or just a passion. But the majority get their information. What's Newsweek say about butter this week? What did USA Today say about saturated fat 3 weeks ago? My buddy was an orthopedic surgeon, lost 50 pounds eating nothing but meat. We blow in the wind because we don't have a foundation to know that there is a process to analyze nutrition science. Again, Dr. Longo from University of Southern California is probably the world's expert on explaining that. But that there is consensus. The Harvard School of Public Health, pretty prominent group, has a food plate that's similar to the Canadian government food plate, that's similar to the Australian government food plate, that's similar to the USD government food plate, that's even similar to the leading vegetarian nutrition food plate. It's fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, peas, lentils. If you want to eat a little high quality animal food, that's your business. But many don't want to do that. Drink water, not milk. And, don't use butter and lard. If you're using an oil, use something like extra virgin olive oil. There's actually huge consensus. And some of the listeners are following a ketogenic diet. Some of the listeners are maybe even following a carnivore diet. Some are following a paleo diet. I recognize many of those are far better than eating at McDonald's every day or eating in a hospital cafeteria. But the science supporting a whole food plant diet for preventing and reversal of disease is enormous, including just in the last few weeks. Alzheimer's prevention, diabetic prevention, a paper on aging and plant-based diets and the benefit, where there's teeny little bits of science. We talk about keto and carnivore way more than we're researching it. Because when the research is done, it's not going to prevent and reverse heart disease. It's not going to.
Very interesting. So we've, being a men's health podcast, Stephen and I have done a ton of research on early indicators of diseases like erectile dysfunction and heart disease. In your experience, are there any additional indicators that might be less commonly known that might have a huge impact on health if left ignored?
Yeah, I'll just mention a couple because we've talked about early indicators of heart disease. If you're having trouble in the bedroom, erectile dysfunction, don't ignore it. We talked about maybe going to get a calcium score CT scan if you can get your healthcare provider to write your prescription. That's a definitive test. There's a couple weird ones. Turning gray early in life, turning bald on top early in life have been correlated with aging heart arteries. There's some imbalance, some of it's genetic, but if your hair is turning white, it might be your antioxidant status and such. There's one last one. There's an unusual finding. 50 years ago, a doctor sitting in his office, patient after patient after patient in New York City, you have heart disease. I'm noticing you have a crease in your earlobe. He wrote a paper in a prominent journal. It's called a diagonal earlobe crease, DELC. The paper suggested that the majority of his heart patients had a crease he did not see in the patients that had other conditions or were healthy. It was kind of forgotten for a while. It's called Frank's sign. But in the last 10 years, there's been a recurrence of interest. And it turns out it's about 70% accurate. If you go to the mirror and you see a deep groove, a deep crease, not because you're wearing a 10-pound earring, just a deep crease, you might have early heart artery blockage. And it's a clue, and it's a pretty accurate clue. It's, in fact, as accurate as doing a treadmill stress test. All you got to do is look in the mirror. There's a theory heart arteries are made, actually all arteries are made of collagen that come about from healthy diets, healthy lifestyle. Your earlobe's made of collagen. Well, if your earlobe is collapsing on itself and causing a crease, it may indicate nutritional deficiencies, genetic disorders that are also happening in other arteries. So go get that calcium CT scan. It's not 100% accurate, the earlobe crease, so a lot of people get good news. Their arteries are fine. Okay, but at least you found out good news.
That's really fascinating. I've never heard about that. So the signs.
That's the thing. You're going to be a pharmacist. Are you going to have the moxie to say to Mr. Smith or Mrs. Elliott, hey, you got a funny little thing on your earlobe. I'm aware of that. Go speak to your doctor about it. Problem is, your doctor's not going to know much about it. The science is there, but it's not being taught.
Wow.
Yeah, never knew about that. That's wild.
If the signs are there, then it's all about educating the patient as to what they should be looking for and taking action. When patients come into your clinic, they're very receptive to your recommendations? I mean, you clearly have a lot of notoriety behind you, but you see.
Some come with the training already. They're looking for somebody that understands plant-based medicine, integrative medicine, alternative approaches, but they're doing it all. They need a little refinement. Some people have not heard. I always ask the question. I mean, these are people who have had heart attacks, strokes, bypass. They've been at universities. They've been at major hospitals. I ask them, have you ever heard of Dr. Ornish? Do you know who Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Bernard, Dr. McDougall? Have you ever watched Forks Over Knives? And, 8 times out of 10, I could be asking about, cosmetology or astrophysics and get the same response. They've never heard. No doctor's taken a moment, no dietitian, no nurse. And there's great ones of all those out there, but in the vast majority. So, yeah, that's a lot of work. And they may be in absolutely horrible shape. but habits, food addictions, spouses, family members, even their own doctor. They go back to their internist and say, wow, I lost 20 pounds since you last saw me. I'm feeling great. I'm eating a whole food, plant, colorful diet. The doctor said, whoa, there's not enough protein there. Why don't you add back chicken and fish? That happens all the time. You don't need to add back chicken and fish. They're generally not healthy foods. And the way we produce them in America, as we already talked about, is dirty and harmful, and also cruel and bad for the environment.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot. This interview has been comprised of the heart health, disease, symptoms, prognosis, diet and lifestyle changes. And we found that the stigma surrounding men's health is a lot of men don't want to get checked out because sometimes they don't want to be open about it, or they don't want to deal with if they have to be on so many medications. And this kind of leads me into our final topic here. So what we've learned, or what we've continued to learn, is that once a patient is told that they're going to be on a statin or an ACE inhibitor, that they're on them for life. It's an indefinite treatment, and that just seemed crazy to the two of us, and it just didn't seem right. So in your professional opinion, and you may have touched on it, you definitely have before, are these cardiovascular diseases reversible to the level of being cured? The word that we never want to use in education, yeah. Cured.
So, the goal of blood pressure medicine is to return elevated blood pressure to normal, let's say 120/70. Are there people who start out on drugs, but they begin an exercise program, they begin a whole food plant-based diet in place of a Western processed diet? They realize that the food they're buying at the grocery store is very high in salt, and they start making home-cooked meals, and they limit their salt. They get rid of butter and lard, and they learn to sleep better and manage stress. And they get dizzy now on blood pressure medicine because their blood pressure is 106/69 on blood pressure medicine, and they can start to reduce it. It happens. It's hard work. There are places people go to where they spend 10 days like on a retreat with Dr. McDougall or Dr. Scott Stoll or True North, which is north of Santa Rosa, California. And really within a couple of weeks, majority of people get off blood pressure medicine. Proves the point. Now, then that person has to be challenged to maintain that super healthy lifestyle and continue the process. But yes, you aren't born with a blood pressure medicine deficiency. You're born with healthy arteries, and over time there's damage from food and stress and other toxins and genetics to some degree. Same is true. Nobody's born with a Lipitor deficiency. There's no such syndrome. There are genetic reasons our cholesterol up, and there's largely lifestyle food choices our cholesterol's up. There is a variability in how people respond to major lifestyle change. There are people that drop their cholesterol. Famous story is there was a aerospace engineer in Santa Barbara, California in the 1950s, Nathan Pritikin. There still is a place in Miami called the Pritikin Longevity Center. And his cholesterol was 320, and he was in his early 40s. He liked hot dogs and ice cream and malts and fries. But he got shook up a little by some advice from a doctor in the area that he was on his way to a heart attack. And within a short time, whole food plant-based diet, his cholesterol was 212. Not everybody gets more than a 100-point drop in cholesterol, but a lot of people do. There are people that they're doing it right, their liver keeps producing, and they may need a natural approach to stopping that or a prescription approach. But can many people get off a statin? Your cardiologist is happy. Your cholesterol is 135, your HDL, your LDL, and you say, Doc, I haven't taken that Lipitor for 6 months. I read a couple books. I watched a couple credible videos like Forks Over Knives. I eat a lot of beans. I eat a lot of oatmeal and oat bran. I put tofu in my salad instead of chicken and turkey and salmon. And I got my cholesterol down. I eat a lot of ground flaxseed and chia seeds and hemp parts. And I haven't taken the drug. What's a cardiologist going to say? It's amazing numbers. That stuff happens.
Yeah, my sister's father-in-law actually had that same experience where he went and doctor said, you're going to be on the statin for indefinitely. He said, I'm not doing that. And she's been vegan for about 6-7 years. She got him on her program for about 2 months, and it cut his cholesterol in half. or cut his,
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, wonderful story. But we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being one of those doctors that are pushing the food as medicine. And we appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your knowledge. It was very informative for us. And everyone, make sure to follow all things Dr. Kahn in the description below and on his website, www.drjoelkahn.com. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Men's Health Unscripted. Subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, share this with your loved ones, and make sure to follow us on social media. Thanks for checking in.
Thank you.
Dr. Kahn.